Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I am finally doing a declutter of all of my eyeshadow palettes, and you can see them all laid out right here. I was planning to lay them out all next to each other, but I realized that I have way too many eyeshadow palettes, so I just had to stack similar brands on top of each other just to fit them all in frame. But here you can see my whole collection, and yeah, I'm just gonna go through and declutter them today because recently I've been feeling very overwhelmed with my eyeshadow collection, and I don't know, I just feel like I've invested a lot of money into better brands recently, and also in my single collection and things like that, and some of my palettes are just a bit outdated, and I feel like since I have so many, I feel very, I don't know, I get decision fatigue when I try to decide what to wear. Obviously my projects affect what I wear quite a lot as well, but I just really want to downsize my collection so that I can reach for the palettes that I really love and the ones that are really good quality, as well as, like I said, my singles as well. So because of that, I have decided to do a declutter today. I'm not gonna do a completely ruthless declutter and declutter like half of my collection or anything like that, but I'm gonna aim to declutter maybe like 10 palettes, which for me is a lot, especially since over the years I have decluttered all of the palettes that I don't really love, or like from more affordable brands where the quality might not be as good as other palettes I have. So yeah, I think it's still going to be quite difficult, but if I can get 10 out, that would be amazing. I'm not going to beat myself up if it's less though, but that is going to be my goal. But before I jump into the declutter itself, if you're new here, please consider subscribing. I would love to have you in the family. But let's just jump in and tackle these palettes. So I don't really know where to start with all of these because again I have so many. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to start by taking some palettes out that I'm definitely not going to declutter because they are, for example, very new to my collection, or just some that I really treasure. So of course I'm going to start with this palette right here, and this is a palette I got for my birthday this year. As you can see, I haven't even taken off the plastic yet, but this is the Mcgrath Utopian Dreams palette. It is an absolutely stunning palette. This is my first Mcgrath palette, and I treasure this so much. My boyfriend got me this for my birthday, and I am in love with this palette. So this is definitely 100% staying. I'm not going to get rid of this anytime soon, so that is going to be the first one that's staying. Next up we have my pile of Natasha Denona palettes. Again, they're not going anywhere. I have 4 of them. The first one is my Natasha Denona Love palette. This is my newest one, and it looks like this. I got this off eBay for a really good discount, but you can see it's barely being used, and this is staying. I love the Natasha Denona formula, and this is what I mean by having palettes that are more expensive that I don't reach for very often, because I have other palettes in my collection that I feel obligated to use. Does that make sense? So yeah, this is definitely staying. Next up we have the Sunrise palette, and this is what this one looks like. It's a stunning palette. It's a beautiful like summer autumn palette, and yeah, this is also of course staying. Then we have my first ever Natasha Denona palette, which is the Metropolis palette. I love this palette. It's a very autumnal palette, but I really love this. You can see I have pan on one of the shades from my Pandas eyeshadows, but this is definitely a palette I want to get more use out of, and this is of course staying. And then lastly we have my Natasha Denona Gold palette. This has unfortunately been discontinued, but I got this last year from my parents for Christmas, and I love this. I used this in my, I think it was my Deco Panning project pan, and I wanted to use it, I think it was 30 times, and I got a lot of use out of this palette in that project, and I definitely want to continue using this because it is a perfect neutral palette, and I really enjoy this formula. Let's do these 2 palettes next. These 2 are my Black Friday purchase from Odin's Eye. I never tried Odin's Eye before, but I picked these 2 palettes up over the Black Friday sale because they had, I think it was 40% off. This is the Red Dragon palette in collaboration with Judy. I actually haven't used this palette yet, but this is what it looks like. I still have the plastic on top here, as you can see, but it's a beautiful palette and I can't wait to play around with this. But of course this is staying because it's brand new to my collection. And obviously same with the Elva palette. This is their Marvelton palette. I have been wanting this palette since it came out, and I just finally bit the bullet. I thought it's too excessive to have in my collection, but I'm actually going to get rid of a palette that reminds me of this a lot, and I think this is going to be a better upgraded formula. So yeah, I'm really excited to have this in my collection again. I haven't really played with it much, so yeah, it's staying because it's brand new to my collection. Another brand that I recently picked up 2 palettes from is the Beauty Bay brand. I recently bought the Book of Magic palette off of eBay. It was brand new when I got it, and I have swatched it a couple of times. I also used one of the shades on my eyes, but this is a beautiful palette. It wasn't one that I necessarily wanted when it came out, which is why I didn't buy it. But the more I saw this in videos, the more I fell in love with the Beauty Bay formula. I just really regretted not picking this up, and as I said, I found this on eBay brand new, so I decided to buy it, and I absolutely love this so far. I swatched everything out, and it's a beautiful colour story, and as I said, I absolutely love the Beauty Bay formula, so this is not going anywhere. And also, I recently picked up the Wilderness palette, which again is a brand new palette to me. So again, there's no need to declutter it, because again, I picked it up I think like 1 or 2 months ago, and I have used this shade, but I need to play with more of the palette. But I've been really focused on hitting goal on a lot of my eyeshadows this year, because we are at the end of the year. But I think I'm gonna allow myself to reach for these palettes more now in December, because yeah, I think December is the time to play around with your makeup, especially to give you a break before you start new projects in the new year. So I definitely want to reach for this palette soon, but it's of course staying. Then we have the Beauty Bay and Declutter palette. This is always so difficult to hold up because it's double mirrored. This one is not new to my collection. You can see I have a lot of pan in this palette, but this is the one that made me fall in love with the Beauty Bay formula, and I absolutely adore this formula and this palette, so of course it is staying. Let's do some indie brands next. We have these right here. We have Sydney Grace and Kaleidos, and yeah, let's start with Sydney Grace. These two I picked up in July, and the Christmas doing July sale, and of course we have the Sweet Indulgence palette, which was a gift with purchase. This was one that I was thinking about potentially not decluttering but depotting, because these singles are magnetic, so I thought about maybe taking these out and putting my singles collection, but I haven't decided if I want to do that yet. But either way, I'm not going to declutter it. I might later on, like I said, depot these, and maybe when I do, I will declutter like 1 or 2 shades, but as for now, this is going to stay in my collection because I haven't played around with it enough. Then of course we have the Tiny Marvels palette, and this is even more nostalgic to me now than it was when I bought it. I wanted this for such a long time, and I finally bit the bullet when I picked up that order from Sydney Grace. It was also the first time buying from Sydney Grace for me, and of course we all know what happened to Mel, which is super sad, but that also means that this palette means even more to me now, and because of that, this is not going anywhere, and it probably won't go anywhere from my collection for a very long time, because I'm so grateful to have this in my collection. Then we have Kaleidos. We have the Club Nebula palette. This was in collaboration with Angelica Nyqvist. I have a few pans in this, as you can see, but I really love this formula, and this has made me want to pick up more of the Kaleidos palettes. Yeah, I love this palette. It was limited edition and it's no longer available, unfortunately, but it is really good, and the quality is definitely there, so again, this is not going anywhere. So those are, I would say, the most special palettes in my collection. As you can see, we have quite a lot remaining. I'm gonna reorganize a bit so that they are more combined, like together, and then I'm gonna go through each brand in order. Okay, so that's better. So yeah, this is kind of when it starts getting, I mean, not difficult, because definitely a lot of palettes here that I know I want to keep, but these, like I said, aren't like the really special palettes to me, the ones that I really love reaching for, that has like really special formulas or memories bound to them or things like that. So yeah, I'm going to jump into continue picking up palettes that I know I'm going to keep, and I'm going to go with the Blueberry Muffin palette next, because as you know, this is my Digipad My Battleship palette. I'm not going to open it up to not give you any spoilers, but I am currently planning this in that project, and I absolutely love it. It's a beautiful palette. I really enjoy this, and yeah, since I'm doing that project, obviously it's staying, but even when I do finish that project up, this is not going anywhere, so this is staying in my collection. Let's do my Huda Beauty palettes next. We of course have my big Huda Beauty palette, which is the Mercury Retrograde palette. Again, I haven't had this for a super long time, and I picked this up in the summer together with the Nude Light palette. But yeah, I love this palette. The formula is amazing again, and this is definitely one that I am looking forward to playing more with in spring, because for me the palette screams spring, and I didn't have it last spring, so definitely going to be a palette that I reach for a lot in the upcoming months. Then we have my first Huda Beauty palette, which was the Gold Obsessions. This was a limited edition palette, I believe. I don't know if it's still available, but it was exclusive to Cold Beauty, and I really love this. This is the first, like I said, palette that I tried from Huda Beauty, and I really enjoyed the formula, which is why I decided to pick up more palettes from her. But yeah, it's a good palette. I really enjoy this. I love the color story, so this is staying. And same with the Nude Light. Again, this is a palette that I've wanted for a long time. I do have pan in this from my Pandos eyeshadows, this is definitely a palette that I want to reach for more. I really love the mauve tones together with the peachy tones. I think again it's going to be a really nice neutral palette. It's a really good travel palette for me as well, if I'm just going away for a weekend, or if I just want something where I can do neutral looks but still like a bit more softer and more natural, I guess. But yeah, I'm really excited to have this in my collection and definitely want to reach for this more in the next year. So I think that is it for brands like overall that I want to keep everything from. In here now I want to kind of go through the rest of these. I guess I'm going to do it by brand because the rest of these, there might be a few things I'm going to declutter one by one. So I'm going to move all the palettes outside and I'm going to start brand by brand. Okay, so we have gone into Colourpop. Let's just start with these palettes right here. I do have quite a few palettes, as you can see, but this is my Colourpop collection at the moment. I have over the years downsized my Colourpop collection quite a bit because there was a point in my life where I loved the quality, I loved the colour stories they came out with, I loved a lot about the Colourpop palettes. It was also a bit of a collection mentality, I wanted to just own them all, but since then I would definitely say that I've grown out of the Colourpop palettes, and the formula isn't there compared to some of the other brands that I have. And also I think since they started launching eyeshadows, the formulations of other cheaper brands have definitely gotten way better, and I feel like they've outdone Colourpop because back in the day Colourpop was a brand that had like one of the best eyeshadow formats for the price, but I don't think that's the case at all anymore. So these are the palettes that I have, like I said, from them left in my collection. A lot of them are the 9 pans. But yeah, I'm gonna go through these now in order and then just kind of tell you what I'm gonna keep and which ones I'm thinking about maybe decluttering. So let's start with the Mandalorian palette and the Child palette. They have the new one now, but this is the original, the Child. I absolutely adore this palette. This is definitely one of the better formulated palettes. The shimmers are amazing, and you can see I have 2 pans here for my Pandas eyeshadows again, but I do want to get better use out of the rest of the palette as a whole. But I do really like this, and it's a bit nostalgic to me as well because my boyfriend got this for me for, I think it was my birthday or Christmas last year. And yeah, it's a really nice palette, and he's a massive Star Wars fan, so it's kind of just fun that he got me this because it's like a mix between the both of our hobbies, I guess, or like interests. So yeah, I love this palette and it's definitely not going anywhere. Another palette that is not going anywhere that I really enjoy but I don't hear too much about is the Through My Eyes palette. This is a palette that I love. You can see that I'm missing 2 shades in here right now, these 2 right here, because they are in different projects, but I absolutely love this palette. It's so underrated to me, and I'm definitely not going to declutter this because I love this, and this has been one of my top Colourpop palettes for years now. I just love the color story, I love the formula in here, like the shimmers are really nice, and the matte as well, and I just feel like it's a unique color story that I don't have like anywhere else. This is a really bright green, and this is like a matte peachy shade. But yeah, I adore this palette, and it's probably going to be one of the last Colourpop palettes that I hold on to, and this again was the Through My Eyes palette in collaboration with I Love Saharan. Another one that I'm not decluttering is my Lilac You A Lot. I really like this palette. They had obviously this and the It's My Pleasure palette. I already decluttered and depotted my It's My Pleasure palette, but this is my favorite purple palette from Colourpop. I love these. I love this purple right here. I love the shimmers, and yeah, it's a nice palette, and I don't have too many purple palettes in my collection, so I'm definitely going to hold on to this one. Another one that I'm going to hold on to as of now is my Glowing Coconuts. I really like this. It's a nice neutral palette. I do have quite a few neutral palettes in my collection, but it's just something about the tone in this that is quite unique, I guess. So yeah, this one is definitely one that I want to hold on to, and yeah, I like this. It's a simple palette. It's a nice, again, travel palette if I need that when we start traveling again. But yeah, I like this, and it's one of my newer Colourpop palettes as well. So this is when we get to a point where I'm not, like, these are kind of like the maybe palettes, the ones that I would potentially consider decluttering. I would say out of these, there's definitely one that I think I'm more keen to keep, and that is my Sweet Talk palette. I do like this palette quite a lot, and it's a very nice peach palette. I do have these warm tones in other palettes, but I don't really have a dedicated peach palette, and that's why I'm going to keep it. I do have 2 shades switched out here, which are these 2 shades here. These were the pressed glitters, but I have all of the pressed glitters from Colourpop in my single selection now, so that those 2 are replaced shades. But otherwise, I really love this palette, and I think it's a nice spring and summer palette as well. With the remaining palettes right here, again, we are kind of like on the iffy territory. I think as of now, again, I'm going to keep the Honey palette. I have been thinking about maybe depotting this as well. Again, I have a replace shade here for the Burst Glitter, but I have been thinking about maybe depotting this and putting it in my singles collection, but I don't think I'm ready for that yet. Yeah, I do have these yellows scattered between palettes, but for now I do really like this palette and I'm not quite ready to let it go. It might be one that I depot or declutter at my next declutter video, but for now it's gonna stay. So here's when it gets difficult, and these are palettes that have been on my kind of maybe list for quite a long time. I'm gonna start with something that I know I'm gonna do. With these two palettes, the Mint to Be and Just My Luck, these are the green palettes from Colourpop. We have the Just My Luck, which is like the original green palette, and then we have the Mint to Be, which is the mint palette. With these two, I have been thinking quite a long time what I want to do with them. Obviously they're not the same in any way, because this is more like a traditional green palette and this is more like a mint palette, but I think it's a bit excessive having both. And I think there's a lot of overlapping shades in these palettes. Like these two, although they look different in the pan, this one is very, very hard pressed and it's hard to get pigment out of it. So I think these two could show up very similar on the eye. They're also very similar to this shade right here. So those three, I will only keep like one of them. And some of these shimmers aren't the best. I also have indie singles that are way better, that are mint shades, and I don't reach for mint shades too often, so when I do, I think I'm going to want to reach for my indie shades more than the shimmers in here. So what I have decided to do is I'm going to depot shades from here and I'm going to create a mix between these two palettes and only keep that. So I'm technically going to declutter one of the palettes, but it's going to be a mix between two. So I'm going to do that afterwards, and if that's something you want to see me film, like the process of picking shades, just let me know and I can film that for you. Otherwise I'm just going to go do it off the camera, and I'm going to create like a Franken palette with these two palettes. I haven't decided which packaging I'm going to keep yet. Yeah, we'll see. But for now, I am going to declutter one of those. So I'm just going to take them into B palette for now as a symbolism for I'm going to declutter one and then I'm going to keep the other. Okay, so here's when it gets a bit more difficult, because these two palettes are both palettes that I do like, and I feel like I've kept these around for a long time because they're just really nice palettes. However, just looking at them now, I can see a lot of overlapping shades in these palettes, and that's what I mean by Colourpop. Like, their thing is they have a lot of repeat shades in different palettes, and I don't know, that's why I depotted a lot of them and I decluttered shades, just because like there were so many duplicates after I depotted them, and I think that's why I'm kind of like, I don't know, I'm not ready to declutter all of them, but I do still really like some specific shades, but I want to move out a few of these palettes. But let's just start with this palette right here. This is my Mar palette. That was originally a mix between just the Mar and the Soul palette, but I've since then added another shades. So it's just like my Franken palette now. And I do really like the shades that are in here, and although I do, like I said, have these one tones and elsewhere, like these shades right here, especially this one, makes it just really bright and different. I also love the mauve tones that I recently added into it, and it just gives it a different like vibe. So I don't know, I'm just torn between what I want to do with it. I mean, I could use this easily, like, depot this. So yeah, this is definitely like a maybe palette. So I'm going to put that to the side as a maybe, because I do like this palette. With the Dreamstreet palette, this is the palette that I've held on for so long, because I wanted this for so long, and I finally picked it up like a couple of years ago now. And I do really like this palette as a whole, but when it comes to this palette, I see it as a neutral palette. Obviously it has a few pops of colors, like it's pops of blues and then the pop of red right here, but as a whole I see it as a neutral palette. And when it comes to neutral palettes, I have other ones that I'm much rather reach for. I have like my soft Glam palette, of course my Natasha Denona palettes, like the gold palette, or like there's definitely neutral shades in other palettes like that. And yeah, I feel like it's just one that I don't really feel like I reach for anymore, but I held on to it anyway. I think what I'm going to do with this, I am actually going to declutter this palette finally. I think I'm going to depot a few shades. Like, I really like this shade right here, specifically that one, but I'm going to compare it to what else I have in my pile. Like, I really like this brown, but I'm sure I have similar shades from Colourpop. So I'm going to compare the singles I have from Colourpop and see what are duplicates. But otherwise, I think I'm going to go ahead and declutter this palette. Yeah, I think I'm ready to do that, so this is going to leave my collection. So those were my Colourpop palettes. I finally got rid of 2 palettes. Let's move on to Anastasia next. I have these 2 piles right here with palettes. I'm not going to lay these palettes out, I'm just going to go through them in the piles they are and kind of go through the declutter there. When it comes to the first one here, Anastasia Modern Renaissance palette, this is a palette that I've had in my collection for such a long time, and it's definitely one that I was definitely debating decluttering, but I think I might actually pan this next year. This is definitely a high contender for my Panda palette next year, and I think because of that I'm going to keep this, at least for now, until I decided what my Panda palette is going to be. If I decide to opt against this, I definitely will declutter it because it's getting really old and I do have better formulas now, but this will most likely be my Panda palette for next year. Soft Glam is another palette that I have been thinking of panning, but I think I'm not quite ready to pan this yet. It's a beautiful neutral palette. It's a staple palette in my collection. I really like a lot of the tones that are in here. I like the warm tones mixed with the mauve tones, and yeah, it's just a cult favorite and I'm not quite ready to let this go yet. Next up we have the Jackie Aina palette. I really like this palette. As you can see, I have quite a few pans in this now, obviously from different projects, but I do really like this palette as well. I want to get more use out of it, but the formula in here is absolutely amazing. It's probably the best formula that Anastasia has created. It's a palette that I really enjoy using, and it's also quite unique. Next up we have the Novena palette, which actually could be considered another neutral palette. I mean, it has a lot of purple and pinks, but it's more neutral purple and pinks, I would say. I really like this palette. It didn't used to be my favorite Anastasia palette, but I really enjoy this now. I feel like it's probably outranked both my Soft Glam and my Modern Renaissance palette, which it didn't used to, but I really just love these rosy tones and the shimmers that are in here, so this one is going to stay. Also, the packaging perfectly matches the Pantone color of 2022, so that's just another kind of sign that I need to keep this. Okay, we're going through these quite quickly, but I honestly don't think I'm going to get rid of anything yet, and that's why I'm like going through them, but I just want to discuss what I think about all the palettes anyway. This is my Subculture palette. Again, I have quite a few pans in here now. I like this palette. It's not the best formula, but I really like the color story, and I picked this up last Black Friday, so it's only a year old in my collection. I think this is not discontinued now, but I also think you might be able to get this in a few places, but I'm not ready to let go of this, and I think it's a really interesting palette from Anastasia. Next up we have the Sultry Palette. I like this. It's a really nice neutral, like cool tone palette. I do have a few cool tone palettes in my collection, but I just really like this one. Again, the shimmers in here are absolutely stunning. It's definitely, again, a better formula than some of the older Anastasia palettes. And I've had this, I think it's just 2 years old this like January, February. So it's definitely getting a little bit older, but it's definitely still performs very well. And yeah, I'm not ready to declutter this yet. So we have 2 palettes to go. The next one is my Prism palette, which I picked up this year again on eBay. It's a palette that I've wanted for such a long time, and I found it really cheap on eBay. It didn't used to have any pans when I picked it up, so you can see that I got a lot of love this year. It's not the best formula from Anastasia, and I definitely think this is a palette that I might declutter eventually, or I also thought maybe about panning this in a future Panda palette, but we just have to see. But for now I do like this. I still want to play around with it more. I absolutely love this shade Sphere right here, and yeah, there's just a few beautiful shades in here, but it's a bit of a weird color story, but it's also quite interesting. And like I said, I wanted this palette for so long, so I'm happy to have it in my collection. It's not my favorite, but it's still new to me, so I do want to keep it. And then lastly we have my Mercury palette. This is another gift from my boyfriend. He picked this up randomly for me once, just when I was having like a difficult day. He just ordered this for me. So yeah, it's a bit of a sentimental palette as well. I really love the pinks in here though, and the shade Barb is a shade that I absolutely adore. So yeah, I'm not ready to let this go either, but it's not my favorite Anastasia palette, but I do really like having this in my collection. So none of my Anastasia palettes are leaving yet, but I think again next time I do declutter, some of these will go. But let's move on to the next brand, which is going to be I think Juvia's Place. So here we have the 4 Juvia's Place palettes that are still in my collection. I think this is going to be another place where I declutter a couple. I do love the formula, but I just don't reach for these palettes very often, apart from... Yeah, I mean, there's definitely 2 here that I'm going to keep, so let's just start with those. Let's start with the Magic Mini palette, because I absolutely adore this. You're going to see in a second that I have a lot of pans in here. It's been well loved. I love the shimmer formula in here. And it's actually another palette that I was considering as my Panda palette, but I don't think this is going to be the year, because with the projects I'm planning to do, it's not the best kind of palette to work with, together with what I'm planning to do, I guess. But it's definitely, like I said, one that I was considering panning. I don't have too many pans to hit in this palette, but maybe next year I'm gonna have a goal of hitting pan on all the shades, and then maybe the next year I'm gonna pan it. But it's gonna stay. Like I said, I adore this palette. Another palette that I really enjoy is the Tribe palette. It is a green palette with a few pops of oranges. It's just a stunning palette. The shimmer formula here is amazing. I'm currently working on this shade here called Ashanti. Obviously I don't have pan, I'm not near pan either, but it's a beautiful shade, and with that I'm going to have a lot of pans in this palette. I'm actually looking at this now. I'm going to put this here temporarily, because you know how I said I'm going to put just my Luck palette and my Meant to Be palette together? But I just feel like putting it next to here. I'm going to get the Mint palette as well, which I put in the Declutter pile as a representation of those two. Obviously the Mint palette is very different, but I feel like a few of the shades here are similar to shades in here. Like these greens are a bit similar to this one. This one is definitely warmer tone, but again, these are more kind of mint shades that would go better with that. I mean, these two aren't the same, but I would much rather reach for this shade than this shade. So although they're not the same, I feel like, for my preference, I would much rather reach for the greens in here compared to in here. There's definitely unique shades in here that I want to keep though. Like I love the shade Mary Jane. It's like a very yellow toned green that I love. So I said that I'm gonna keep one of them and put them in, like, I'm gonna basically make my own green palette. But looking at it now, I think I am ready to declutter both of them, but I'm gonna depot a few shades. Yeah, I think that's going to be what I'm doing. I feel like, again, I'm much rather going to reach for this palette than this palette. And I also, for example, have greens in my Metropolis palette and things like that. And again, scattered from my collection and in my singles collection. So I'm going to declutter both my Just My Luck palette and my Meant to Be palettes. And with that, obviously, I am going to keep the Tribe palettes. So then we have these two palettes right here. And these top are palettes that I've been thinking about decluttering. Let's start with the Deuce palettes. So the Deuce palette looks like this. Looking at it now, like at the shades, I'm leaning towards keeping it anyway. I just love it. I love this pink right here. I love these two shades as well. They look like neutral shades, but they just have a different undertone. Like I just love those two shades. But I just never reach for this palette, and I have like other palettes I prefer using. I might use this for like a singular look every now and then, but I don't know, I just feel like I'm ready to let this one go. So before I change my mind, I'm gonna declutter this one. I was thinking about maybe like depotting a few shades, but I'm gonna see if a friend wants this as a whole, and if not, I might do that. But I also might just declutter the whole thing, because I think I'm ready to let this one go. With the Saharan 2 palette, again, this is a palette that oh god, I'm so torn on. I feel like, again, I'm ready to declutter this, but then I was sitting yesterday swatching some of these shadows, and they are just stunning. Like, this shade here is stunning, this is a stunning blue, this is a really stunning mint. Like, compared to like what I said with the Colourpop palettes before, like, they don't have this impact as the Juvia's Place shadows. But again, I still have my indie shadows, my multichromes, things like that, that I would much rather reach for than that mint. I love this shade as well. It's like peachy gold kind of duochrome. Yeah, it's a beautiful palette, but I just don't reach for this very often. And I think I could probably dupe out most of these shades in my collection, and I think because of that I'm going to declutter it. Again, I'm probably going to check if a friend wants the whole palette, and if not, I might depot a handful of shades or like repress them into my singles collection, but I am ready to let this one go. That was quite successful. I got rid of 50% of my Juvia's Place palette. It's a bit surprising, because a couple of years ago I would definitely have said that especially Saharan 2 palettes were one of my favourite Juvia's Place palettes, but I just need to be honest with myself that I don't reach for it very often, and it's time to let that one go. So we don't have too many palettes left to go through. So far I actually decluttered 5, so that is going really well. And these are the brands where I am definitely gonna declutter a few, but let's just go through 2 that I know I'm gonna declutter. These 2 here are my Naked palettes. Actually, I have the Naked Mini palette, or sorry, I always call it the Naked Mini, I mean Naked Basics palette right here, which is my palette this year. So obviously when I'm done panning this year, it's going to leave, so that is going to be technically another declutter, I guess. But I'm working on it now, so I don't know where to put this, but I think I'm going to put it in my, I guess in my save pile for now, because hopefully I'm going to finish most of these shades anyway. And I've been thinking about depotting the black that is left in here. I'm not going to open up to not give you any spoilers, but for now I'm guessing this is going to stay because it is my palette. But also know that at the end of the year this will be gone from my collection. Then we have these two right here, which are two palettes that I have been trying to get more love out of this year. We have the Naked 3 and the Naked 1 palette. As you can see, I have a lot of pan, especially in the Naked 1, not so much in the Naked 3. But these two are my focus palettes on my Pandas eyeshadows this year, and I try to get as many pans in these two as possible, and yeah, you can see I have a few now. The Naked palette here is super old. I remember exactly when I got this. I got this the first time I went to New York, which is also the first time I went to the States, which was June 2012. I went there with my family. I remember it very vividly. I had such a long wish list of makeup that I wanted to buy that at the time was impossible to get in Sweden, and this was top of my list basically. I picked this up in Sephora, I believe, and yeah, I absolutely love this palette. I used it so much. It was the only palette I had for such a long time, and yeah, I really like this. Then with this palette right here, I bought in London when I first moved here back in 2012, and I lived here between 2012 and 14. So I actually moved to London about 2 months after I visited New York. I know I didn't pick this palette up straight away. I think I might have picked this up in 2013. But that also means that this here is about 9.5 years old, and this is about 8.5 years old, or maybe more like 8. I'm not quite sure how old this is exactly, but this is definitely getting rather old. And I've been keeping for so long because it's been a nostalgic palette to me. It's been one that I just loved having in my collection. It's still a decent palette. It's not the best performing, but some of the shades in here are absolutely stunning. And the formula is still really, really good. I adore certain shades, like I love Sidecar, I love Half Baked. And yeah, it's just those two specifically. I love those two shades, and overall it's a nice palette. It has some really nice mattes. I mean, it only has 2 mattes, especially the Naked palette has these 2 mattes here. And they're really nice shades. I love this shade palette because of the tones in here, but that's what I was saying. I picked up it's on my pile of keeping now, but you know, before I mentioned the Elva palette by Odin's Eye, yeah, and I said I am allowing myself to pick this up now because I'm decluttering a different palette, and this is the palette I'm decluttering because it has those mauve tones that palette has, but I just feel like that is the newer, more modern, better formulated version of the Naked 3. So because of that, both of these are leaving my collection. Finally, I am working on a few shades in these two palettes. Actually no, I'm not working on anything in the Naked 3, but I'm working on one shade in my, 2 shades sorry, in my Naked palette. So I'm going to keep them obviously for the update, and I'm going to continue working on those shades until then, but after that they are going to leave my collection at the end of the year, so I'm going to consider these decluttered. So we only have 4 palettes to go, so I'm just going to do them all together. We have these palettes right here. Some of them are Catkin, and then we have Tilbury and Dose of Colors. Let's start with my Catkin palettes. I got these in PR, and it meant so much to me when I got these 2 palettes. This is the first palette right here, which is a beautiful warm tone palette. I have used this one, used a few shades. Like this shade right here is really beautiful. It's like almost like a bit of a tiny bit firmer than a Subculture shadow, but it's a similar formula, and it has loads of multicolored sparkles in it. This is a beautiful shade as well, but I just feel like I won't really reach for this compared to other palettes that I have in my collection. And I don't know, I just have these warm tones elsewhere and I prefer those, and I want to kind of keep this because I got it in PR, but I need to be realistic with myself, and since I am moving soon, I mentioned this briefly in my empties video I believe, but I am actually going to move in end of January. Someone commented asking if I'm going to leave the UK. I'm not. I'm going to stay in London. I'm just going to move to different flats. Yeah, so because of that I just want to get rid of a lot of clutter. I don't want to bring palettes that I'm not going to use, and because of that I think it's just time to let this one go. It is a beautiful palette and I haven't used it nearly enough, but I don't know, it's a nice formula, but it doesn't really bring me joy like some of my other palettes, and because of that I'm going to declutter this. But before I do though, you need to just take a moment for this packaging. Is such a well made palette. Like the packaging on these are absolutely stunning. And exactly the same, we have this palette right here. I don't know what these are called. One of them is like the spring palette, and I can't remember what they're called because it doesn't say on the back. I mean, it says on the back, I think in Chinese, but not in English. But this palette right here is more of a pinky, purpley. It's not really pink, it's more purple, warm neutral palette. But again, I just don't reach for this, and I am going to declutter this for the same reason as I'm decluttering the larger one. I did, however, also get I got 3 lipsticks from them in PR as well, and I'm going to keep those because I absolutely love those lipsticks. But I just have so many eyeshadows that I need to be realistic with myself and declutter those that I don't use. So yeah, those 2 are leaving. And then we have these 2 palettes right here, which are 2 really big maybes for me. And I'm actually looking at my Declutter palette, and I decluttered 9 palettes so far, so I'm very, very pleased with myself. So yeah, these are the palettes right here that I'm kind of like iffy about. Let's start with the Charlotte Tilbury palette right here. This is the Easy Eye palette for the Charlotte Darling look. I got this as a gift with purchase, and it's such a luxurious palette. The packaging is absolutely stunning, and it's just a nice color story. But again, I don't really reach for this very often because I have other palettes that I reach for more. Again, I think this would be a really nice travel palette, but I have other ones that I really would probably rather reach for, and I just haven't really reached for this. I think I used it maybe once or twice, but as you can see, it's almost brand new. And I think what I'm going to do with this, and I think I'm going to try to sell this palette, and then, yeah, I don't know. I think I'm going to try to sell this, and if I can't, then I might keep it in my collection. But yeah, I just feel like I have other palettes that I would rather reach for, and if I can get a little bit of money back for this, then I will. But otherwise, it is a really nice formula, and I would keep this. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put this in my, I guess I'm going to put it in my Declutter pile, and for if I can sell it, which I probably think I will be able to do. But otherwise I will probably bring it back to my collection. Then lastly we have my Dose of Colors Francaise palette, which is a palette that I've wanted for such a long time, and it's a beautiful palette in my collection. But I just need to be honest, I don't reach for this. I only reach for this for these 2 shades right here when they were in my Pandos eyeshadows, but otherwise I haven't reached for this at all. I love certain shades in here. I love this shade right here. I love these 2 shades. I especially love the shimmer shades, to be honest. The mattes are, when I use them, they're really, really nice. They're very buttery, very soft. But they're still a bit harder pressed in the palette, so they're really nice. Honestly, they're really nice formula, but I just have these shades over and over in my collection, so I don't really reach for these. I reach for this palette for the shimmers. But I need to be a bit honest with myself, I don't reach for this palette. I feel like I would reach for this more as singles, but again, I think I'm going to try to sell this. Although I have to pan in 2 shades, it's not that I use. I'm going to clean this palette off, and I'm going to try to sell it, and if I can't, I probably will depot the shades that I like and declutter the rest. Yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do. I love this palette, but I just don't reach for it, and I have singles that are equally, if not better, than those shimmer shades that I really enjoy, so I think it's time to let this one go. And then we have my One Maybe palette, which is the Mar palette from Colourpop. I think for now I'm not ready to declutter this yet because I love reaching with this in summer, so I'm going to keep this for now. It is, like I said, a Franken palette, so I love these shades. So honestly, if I weren't going to keep this, I would probably just put these back in my singles collection, which kind of defeats the purpose in a way. So I'm going to keep this because I did really well with decluttering the other palettes. So I'm going to bring out the palettes that I'm decluttering so we can get an overview, but I believe I decluttered 11. So here are the palettes that I decided to declutter. I do have 11 here, so I did better than I thought I would. But again, I just need to be more honest because I'm bringing in eyeshadow palettes and single shadows, and just my numbers getting out of control basically. So I just need to be honest with what palettes I actually use and which palettes I don't. And these are palettes that I just don't reach for, or that I can dupe out, or that I have other things that I prefer. So yeah, these are the ones that I definitely will have to get rid of. And also, like I said, my Panel palette is also another one that's going to leave. So at the end of this year, I'm going to take out 12 palettes from my collection, which I'm so thrilled about. Again, I'm going to check if my friends want any of these, otherwise I probably will just get rid of a couple of them. Maybe some of them I can give to my mom as well. Like, I think I can make a version of the Dreamstreet palette for her without the blues. Because she doesn't really wear much eyeshadow, but she do like a few neutral palettes. But again, I'm going to check with my friends first. But yeah, that is it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed this declutter, and if you did, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And otherwise, I will catch you in my next one. Bye guys!